Hello and welcome to the 13th episode of Homiltea. I'm your host, Sean. This is a solo podcast, as you're hearing from me, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But if you're viewing this, you also notice that Blake is not here. There is no relation between us not having an episode last week and him not being here. Last week, we decided to take a break. Because we don't want to just be pumping out content to you guys. We want to be pumping out some quality stuff. And we felt like we needed a time to really relax and reflect on what we've been doing for the past 2 months on this podcast, which has been truly amazing. Well, 3 months, actually, which has been truly amazing. It's been a very humbling experience, and we are very grateful to be doing it. But him not being here is because Blake, unfortunately, hasn't seen The Chosen that much. I think he's maybe seen 3 total episodes. And he wants to see it. He just hasn't found time. I have seen every episode, including this season, which we are going to be doing a review on. There's going to be spoilers. So, fair warning, there's spoilers. All right. Now that we got that out of the way, I'm going to be also doing the readings just like every podcast. So bear with me, for this is our first solo episode. I want to thank you guys for sticking it out with us. Again, we haven't really been posting that much content on other social medias. Like I said, we want to post quality stuff, and we've been really thinking about how we can improve the quality of content and how we can really get to you guys on the importance of Catholicism and religion, and the message that Jesus gives us. So, again, bear with me. This is a solo episode, but I'm going to try my best, going to do my best, and here we go. So the readings, this comes from the third Sunday of Lent. The theme is Stop Making My Father's House a Marketplace. This is when Jesus goes to the temple and, well, he's enraged at what he sees. The theme is laws and worship. So the first reading comes from the book of Exodus, actually. Let's see. It's on the 10 Commandments. The summary is that some civil and religious laws were so intimately intertwined in Hebrew culture. We must read the laws of the Old Testament with this in mind. Civil laws and laws clearly conditioned by time and culture, dietary laws, not to blind us any longer. The 10 Commandments, however, are timeless. Millions of Christians and Jews alike live by these laws. There is not only human but also divine wisdom embedded in them. But remember, in observing laws, we Christians should be motivated by love. You did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you received a spirit of adoption, through which we cry, Abba, which means Father. So, I want to talk about these rules. The 10 Commandments should be followed. That is, regardless of you are Christian or Jewish, the 10 Commandments should be followed. That is since been, for the past, I believe, 3,000 years, maybe 4, since Exodus. I don't know the time period. I just know that it was many years before the coming of Christ. We follow these laws to this day, and that's what makes us moral human beings. However, some of these later generations of rabbis lost sight of what God's grace really is, and took these laws to a T into such detail that instead of being faithful to God and being faithful to the people of Israel, they became scornful and above them. No humility, no humbleness. They were of a class of their own. So in understanding the 10 Commandments, you also need to understand humility. The responsorial psalm is, Lord, you have words of everlasting life. The law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The decree of the Lord is trustworthy, giving wisdom to the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The command of the Lord is clear, enlightening the eye. Lord, you have everlasting life. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The ordinances of the Lord are true, all of them just. They are more precious than gold, than a heap of purest gold, sweeter also than syrup or honey from the comb. This, all of responsory of Psalm just means that, the words that he gives us, like the Ten Commandments, like I said, and everything through the prophets and the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament nowadays, his words are not just words, if that makes sense. They all have some sort of meaning. Even if it's not said literally, you should really take some time to think about what Christ says. And not every time is it the same, and not every person feels the same way. And that's the beauty of it. It is how you take it, and it is how you move forward with it. But there is definitely a wrong way to think about it. To put oneself before God and over God is the wrong way. You should always find humility in what Christ says. The second reading comes from 1 Corinthians. Christ, the power of God. Jews demand signs, the gospel. They want spectacular. Greeks want wisdom. Everything must be clearly understandable. There is no room for intuition, vision, and mystery. It may be that Paul's Jews and Greeks characterize two kinds of Christians. The first compromises those who hanker for the spectacular in worship. It must be exciting or else they will not come. They are people who ask, what does a worship service offer me? And not, what can I do to make it meaningful? The second compromises the rationalists who crave wisdom, analyze, insight, but do not realize that the values like mystery, intuition, love, or faithful can be analyzed without being destroyed. Paul offers his vision to both groups, namely the cross, Christ crucified. What is your stand? There is a law of worship. I can honestly read the reading. It's very, very short, but it's quite powerful. Brothers and sisters, Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to Gentiles, but to those who call Jews and Greeks alike. Christ, the power of God, the wisdom of God, for the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. Those who believe in Christ and those who are of different backgrounds are really one of the same. Again, we look back to the Old Testament when it was really frowned upon for Jews and Gentiles to walk the same path and to believe in the same things and to break bread with one another. But God calls all of his children to follow him, and I think that's important to note, especially in nowadays. So the gospel today is actually according to John. And prediction of the resurrection. Very, very powerful. I can see it already. In chapter 2, John relates the wedding at Cana and the first of Jesus' signs. Then he relates the cleansing of the temple. Again, signs are in a picture. What sign can you show us? Many began to believe when they saw the signs he was doing. John wants to teach that Jesus put an end to the old ways of worship in the temple and inaugurated a new worship in spirit and truth. This transition was accompanied by Jesus' death and resurrection. Organized worship and laws for participating in make sense only if worship is motivated by spirit and truth. God is not interested in hypocritical display. Make your worship meaningful today. again, there was rabbis, there was many people back in the day who took the Old Testament to a darker meaning, living above others and seeing yourself as a statue above many people, and almost like an idolization. And then many people did not see Christ as the true figure, even after his miracles were done right in front of him. They would still question it. But many of us know his miracles. Many of us know what he did for us 2,000 years ago, and what he continues to do for us today. Yet we still sin against him. Yet we still betray him from day in and day out. It is up to us to repent and to confess and to try and do better, to try and sin no more, and to try and walk a better path for God and with God, so that maybe one day that we can walk alongside him in the kingdom of heaven. And that's important to note. So, without further ado, we're going to jump into the season 4 of The Chosen review. Again, I've seen it all, and this is a spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. There will be spoilers. Okay? So, I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to get out, and I will see you next week. We are going to be posting more reels, so if you haven't seen The Chosen, I will see you later. All right, here we go. It is time to review season 4 of The Chosen. Wow. I don't think The Chosen really has ever been in theaters, and if it has, I never have seen it in the theaters. I've only seen it at home after it has come out. It has become my favorite series of all time. And whenever I'm bored, instead of people watching Grey's Anatomy or The Office, or New Girl, I find myself watching The Chosen. Not because of how, I have this podcast and everything and I want to be more holy, but because it's entertaining. And I think that when you have something like this that's not so focused on the intensity of Christ, but the humanity of Christ, I think that's really beautiful, and I think that's what really captures people's attention. So, the first episode, what happened there? Let's see. The Chosen was already. Sorry, I'm reading a review right now, trying to see, because it was like 3 weeks ago that the first episodes came out. It came out episode 1 through 3. It's really kind of a reunion. It's a reunion, and a lot of it is somewhat happy. It's the main theme is Rama and Thomas. They're reunited, and it is such a beautiful thing, and they kind of propose to each other, and they're like, yeah, let's do this, but we obviously cannot have Rama's father in the picture, because he does not see Thomas as a noble man, a humble man, and a one that can rightfully give his daughter a proper life. Because he is follower of Jesus, because he gives up everything, because he's a nomad. However, they try and find a way, and they're like, oh, well, maybe Jesus can throw in there. And I think it's funny how Barnaby and Shula are kind of chaperoning them, and from a distance, telling them not to like hold hands or anything. I think that's really funny and really kind of a cute area. What else happens in episode 1? The baptizer. Yep, John gets beheaded. Honestly, that was a really, really tough arc in that entire episode. Seeing the birth of John, the birth of John, the pregnancy of Elizabeth, and ultimately the execution of John the Baptist. After all, John is my namesake. So I felt some sort of special connection with that, and it was really sad. It was really sad to watch. I enjoyed the character on screen. Obviously, I really enjoy the person that I read about a lot in the Bible. So seeing him beheaded was definitely a setup for the rest of the season, that this is going to be a very serious season, and it's not one to be taken lightly. Oh, man. Yeah, it was tough. But it was kind of interesting to see how old Elizabeth really was. I know we kind of get a little glimpse of it when she was pregnant in the Bible, and that, she obviously was older than Mary, but I didn't think she was way older. So it's pretty remarkable that that took place. And again, John being my namesake, I kind of related to him. My parents were of the older range that they could have a child. So in another way, I connected that part of John's story to mine, which I guess, affected me a little bit more. But it was more of kind of just Jesus I think he just realized that obviously he knows what's happening and he knows what's going to happen, but it's kind of him trying to be human, trying to be more human, and trying to, find humility and find remorse for what's to come. And then episode 2 comes. So obviously John's beheaded. John is dead. Andrew gets the news, and it's pretty tough on Andrew, right? It's very, very tough because Andrew was a big follower, along with Philip, and we actually get a new Philip in the series, and this Philip is actually, he's pretty good. I do miss the old Philip. I like the way he portrayed the character, especially whenever he came on for his debut, and how he kind of portrayed his friendship with Matthew, and understanding Torah. Again, I'm going to miss him, but I think that this new actor who's portraying Philip is doing a fabulous job. A very, very good job. So Philip and Andrew are met by... Oh, what's her name? Let me see real quick. She is on council with Herod, and sorry if you hear my keyboard in the background. Oh, what is her name? I can't think of it right now. What the heck? Who is friends with the baptizer? Well, she tells the news. And obviously Andrew is very sad. Joanna. Again, Joanna explains that John's dead. Philip takes it bad. All the disciples really take it bad, but Andrew he's actually a lot better than what he used to be. He used to be very, very sad, very, very emotional. He obviously still is very emotional, but he is becoming more understanding of the plan, right? He's becoming more understanding of what is to come, and so then they're going to travel to a location that's really not described. I think it's Philippi, that Christ leads them. Sorry if I'm like mumbling and bumbling right here. This was like 3 weeks ago. I promise as this episode goes on, I'll be more and more detailed oriented. But they actually go to what is called the gates of hell. There is an actual place called the Gates of Hell where there's a lot of paganism going on. And this is actually a very famous time because this time is when Simon becomes Peter. This is where the papacy is in the Bible. It's crazy. People are like, oh, the Pope doesn't come from the Bible. This was just made up. No. The rock, the foundation from the Sermon on the Mount, the rock was foreshadowing Simon becoming Peter, Peter becoming the first pope of the Catholic Church. Originally it was called the Way, but St. Ignatius coined the term Catholicism. However, it's the same church. This is where Peter becomes, and a lot of the disciples start to become jealous. They start to be like, why is Simon Peter, Peter Simon, and they get the names confused for a while, and it's pretty funny to watch. Why is he the best disciple? Why is he the best apostle? What is going on? Why is he the best? Or why does he get a name change? Why don't I get a name change? And this is when you start to see that the followers of Christ really aren't understanding his ways. They're really not they're not getting humility. They're not understanding how you should walk with Christ and follow God's way and just let him do his thing and surrender to him. Especially since season 3 ended with Simon and Jesus going back at it because Simon's wife lost the child, and he was saying, look, why didn't he just save him? He can do all things. And of course, Simon regained his faith after walking on water and being held by Jesus. Why is he now becoming the head of the church to come? Why is he becoming the rock? Well, this is one of the mysteries. It may not be given a definite answer, and there's many things that Christ does that doesn't give a definite answer, and this is one of the beautiful mysteries of the Catholic faith and Christian faith in general, of why Peter becomes the Pope, essentially, right there. But it's a remarkable scene and something that, as a Catholic, I really, really enjoyed watching, right? So they do that, and I don't think that much happens after. Yeah, it was a lot of just mourning the John and just being respectful towards Jesus and not really overbearing. That will come more towards episode 4 through 6. But in the third episode, this is where he's like, okay, I'm going to do a sermon. I'm going to go to Capernaum, and I will stand outside where the Sanhedrin, the rabbis are studying, right? And I will start preaching. And then he starts challenging. Actually, the rabbis challenge him because they think they're smart. And then he challenges them back. And they get all in a fuss. And it starts to create a mob, right? Well, Quintus, the Roman centurion, is there, right? Primi. And hold on one second. And he is observing. Obviously, you're starting to get the sense that Quintus is becoming and he's starting to become a believer in Christ. I'm sorry, I'm looking up something. He's starting to become a believer in Christ, and he's just really observing and just making sure there's no violence. Well, what is his name? Atticus Aemilius. He is the cohortus urbanae, observes this and tells Quintus, look, there's trouble now. You better go get no, not Quintus. Oh my gosh. Gaius. I'm sorry, Gaius. Primi Gaius. Primi Gaius is observing. He's becoming more of a believer. And then cohortus urbanae, secret police, basically, Atticus Emilius goes up to him and says, you need to get Quintus. You need to alert Quintus and get this under control, or you're going to have some problems on your hands. And he's like, well, I don't understand, blah, blah, blah. And, well, he goes off and away, and Gaius gets his personal man and sends him to Quintus and says, go deliver a message. Well, Quintus comes, and he's all furious because people haven't paid their taxes, and there are too many people, and he's such like a money-hungry guy, and he's such a statistical lunatic. Well, what happens is he's enraged and puts Gaius in cuffs because he didn't do anything. Well, now Atticus comes up to Quintus and says, now this is your job. Well, Quintus is enraged because Atticus is basically the right hand of Caesar, right? He's the eyes and ears for Caesar, who is Rome. And, everything in that world was revolving around Caesar. Well, he tells him, if you don't do anything, then, you're basically going to get removed from office. Well, he gets enraged, he draws his sword, and he gets his feelings hurt. Jesus and his disciples decide to leave. There's a mass going on around, and is a loss of communication. Well, Thomas comes back from Rama, and Thomas bumps into Quintus, and Quintus is so enraged that a Jew dare touch him that he strikes his sword, but he doesn't strike his sword at Thomas. He actually misses and hits Rama. Rama dies right then and there, right before Jesus' eyes, and Thomas, well, this is the trouble Thomas that we start seeing throughout the season. This is where it begins. Thomas is like, why didn't you raise her from the dead? And all Jesus can say is, I'm so sorry. And that was the end. It was very controversial. And actually people were, kind of disgusted at the actor of Quintus. Well, the actor of Quintus, Quintus, after he killed Ramo, you get like a short clip at the end where Atticus reprimands Quintus basically, and is very ticked off on how he handled the situation, and then blank scene. People were actually mad at the actor who played Quintus, and I think he did a phenomenal job. I think this is actually the last time we do see Quintus on screen, because he gets demoted in episode 4. So episode 4 comes, and it starts out with that, and then Gaius comes in, and guess what? He's made praetor because the people love him. He loves the people, and he realizes that, maybe Gaius is better for this job than Quintus was, because Quintus was more of a statistical guy who didn't really care about the Jews. He didn't really see them as people. Well, Gaius does. Gaius is actually a believer in Christ, and we'll see that later on in this little section. So, where Rama is dead. Rama is dead. This is now episodes 4 through 6. Okay, Rama's dead, and they have to go give it to Caphne, deliver the body to Caphne, and it's just a very, very solemn Shiva, mournful walk. Thomas is having a lot of thoughts going on through his head of, either what can I say to Christ or Jesus, and then what am I going to say to Caphne? Well, Caphne comes up and is very disgusted at Thomas and Jesus in general, and they're all mourning, and Caphne's just cursing them out, cursing them, saying that he is going to do everything in his power to make sure that Jesus is worth nothing, and that Jesus is condemned for his actions. Well, this is where actually a little foreshadowing comes in, and Caphne actually reaches the attention of the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, and they are starting to use this as some leverage on him to get rid of Jesus. So let's jump back to Gaius, Praetor Gaius now. Praetor Gaius, as we remembered in the previous season when he was with at the time, Simon, now Peter, has a son that was not of his wife, but his servant. And he was a little servant boy, and he got sick. Well, Gaius goes by himself. Well, no, he's brought by Matthew and Simon, Peter, to Jesus. And man, he just lays it out. He calls him Lord and everything, and what you saw in the past like 4 or 5 episodes, including parts of season 3 of the disciples questioning him and everything. Gaius is the extreme example of what it means to surrender to God and surrender to Christ. Just lays it all out for him and says, look, we may have come from 2 parts of the world, but I believe in you. I have seen your miracles. I understand your teachings. I have seen you preach. My son is sick. I know you can heal him from afar, and that's all I ask. And everything that you do, only say the word, and my soul shall be healed. Like, it is. I'm like, oh my gosh, he is saying prayers that we preach now in Norvis Ordo in the Catholic Church. Like, this is where it comes from. It comes from Gaius. Obviously, I don't think Gaius is I don't think he's a biblical character. I think they kind of modeled him after somebody that's to come. Like, I think he's maybe an unknown centurion, but we'll get to that after my review of episode 7 and 8 when I give predictions out. But yes, it is remarkable. And Jesus turns to the disciples and says, look, all of you, this is what it truly means to be faithful. This is what it truly means to surrender to me. And I think it's just so beautiful. And I think so many people need to take note of that and not just pass that up. That was the most powerful scene I have seen from the Chosen since he met Nathaniel. Man, it was remarkable. It was remarkable. Okay, let's see. What else we got? Okay, so episode 5, religious politics. Okay, so this is when I believe Joseph of Arimathea is being introduced to the Sanhedrin. He is starting to understand all of these different pacts and social orders and whatnot, and how, yes, they're all Jews and they're all, rabbis and part of the Sanhedrin. However, they are very different in how they practice Torah, who they believe in, who they'll vote for, who they'll take basically donations and bribes from. And he's basically saying like how corrupt it is. And it's very interesting to find that out and to understand how corrupt today's politics are. No matter if you sit on the left or the right side, no matter what country you come from, many of today's politicians and governments are actually extremely corrupt. And it's quite funny to see how it really hasn't changed in 2,000 years. But not to get political, just stay on the topic. So Shmuel and Joseph, or I shouldn't say Joseph, Yusuf. I say Joseph of Arimathea because I believe that Yusuf in The Chosen is Joseph of Arimathea. Especially, I think that Yusuf actually is Hebrew for Joseph. Yeah, they're just discussing the politics and whether or not, they are allowed to do stuff. And we're trying to find a certain pact or job for Yusuf and everything. And Shmuel is just like, you got to just roll with it. You got to just roll with it. And Yusuf is like, but that's not me. And we see the humility and the real passion that, these two characters have for what is right. But they are understanding that perhaps to get away with the Sanhedrin, you have to act a certain way, talk a certain way, believe in certain things just to get by. And that's just not how they work. Well, in episode 6, we get the celebration of Hanukkah. This is pretty cool, especially since I've been a cradle Catholic. I haven't really been able to witness a Hanukkah in person, so this was kind of cool to see kind of how it was performed years ago. Obviously, it's a little bit different now. That's what I would think. but it's basically the same concept, I believe. Yeah, so it's very heartful moments, especially with them, playing each other, in the stories. You get to see, Mary and, oh, what's her name? I don't know why I keep forgetting these names. Her name is Tamar. Tamar. You see Mary and Tamar arm wrestle, which is very, very funny. But you also get to see more of Thomas. You get to see more of Thomas kind of shifting away. And the guys kind of like, gaining up. It's like, hey, let's get Thomas something. Let's see how it's going to go. All the meanwhile, throughout, I don't think anything really happened from, no, sorry, I kind of skipped over it. The last episode of the 1 through 3, they were at Lazarus's house, right, with Mary and Martha and the Blessed Mary. And towards the end, you see how after his meeting with his old friend and mentor, Judas is starting to slip away. Right? He kind of hides some coins for himself, and then come episode 4 through 6, Matthew kind of catches him on it, especially him being a tax collector or former tax collector, and him being very good with numbers. He is not one to slip up from a minor error. And Judas, again, he's also really good with numbers, kind of just shrugs him off and says it's really none of your business. Well, they try to get Thomas a new pair of shoes because although he has very, very high quality shoes going for him, they're probably not the best quality of walking shoes. They're like, oh, well, during Hanukkah, you give each other presents. Like Matthew and John gave each other stuff to write with, foreshadowing the Gospels that they will both write. Yeah, a few other presents were given. I don't recall them all. However, Judas had a big problem with them giving Thomas really anything, especially shoes, since he already has shoes, because more of, instead of a charity giving person, he's more of a, financial, this is what we need. And you'll find that out more towards episodes 7 and 8, and I'll discuss that in a little bit. But Judas is starting to slip away more and more with anger and starting to not really coincide with more of his fellow disciples' teachings, right, from the rabbi of Jesus of Nazareth. So that starts to happen. They try and cheer Thomas up, and they do eventually gift him the shoes. And Thomas is actually very grateful, and he later states that, these shoes are actually feeling pretty well on the hiking side, which is remarkable considering that he had very, very high quality shoes. However, they weren't really good for long distance, which them being nomads, that's what they needed. Well, Jesus receives a letter during Hanukkah that Lazarus is sick, and Peter notices it, kind of asks Jesus what's going on, and Jesus says like that Lazarus is sick, but it's not deathly ill. Deep down, I think we all knew that Jesus knew what was to come, but he was trying to remain more human than divine at that point, especially with him being really good friends with Lazarus growing up. And again, he takes orders from the Father. He listens to the Father, and sometimes that stuff isn't said out loud, so perhaps this was something that, they had discussed with one another. However they do so, that it's not his time to heal Lazarus, but to let him eventually pass, which he does towards the end, but we'll get that in a second. They go to Jerusalem, Judea, to the temple to start preaching. And this is when things get chaotic. He, obviously claims to be the Son of Man, and he does it like 4 or 5 times, and the rabbis are still like, "Oh, are you claiming to be him?" He's like, "I just told you who I am," and he, finds every single way to get under their skin. While the rabbis start stoning them and throwing rocks, and actually, Big James ends up getting injured. James the Lesser, or Little James, as known in the show, injures himself. He's obviously been dealing with a lot of pain all his life, but even more so after they had to run away from the temple because they were going to be persecuted for their crimes and blasphemy, according to Jewish law. They run back. Zebedee arrives and says, "Hey, look, I know you guys just got stoned, but it's going to get worse. I've received word from Yusuf to the scribe of Capernaum, who is dealing with Zebedee on the olive oil business, and says, hey, look, you need to go get the disciples and let them know we are true followers. However, Yusuf and I do not have complete power yet, or any say in what's going to happen. We can only just warn you guys." So Zebedee goes on a mission and finally reaches up after they are stoned. Big James is hurt. Big James kind of leaks out how Jesus has already raised someone from the dead, but that's kind of like passed over a little bit, especially with Big James having concussion. And I've had a concussion. I've had plenty of concussions before, and there's been stuff that I've said that probably should have remained a secret. But it was kind of funny to watch that. All the meanwhile, Mary comes up and notices that Jesus is troubled through all the chaos and starts crying. And Jesus says, "You're the only one really who's like following me in the way that I know." And she starts tearing up, and he reads the letter, and Lazarus is dead. Lazarus is dead. This is from Mary and Martha, that Lazarus has officially died of his illness. And, well, it ends with them, saying, like, you will see. You will now see in what I fall. All right. Episodes 7 and 8. I just saw this not even an hour ago. Okay? So this is very fresh in my mind. Episode 7. Oh boy. This is a powerful one. This is the resurrection of Lazarus. You can just feel the tension in the entire episode between Thomas and Jesus. And John, the apostle, the whole time is trying to comfort Thomas, trying to say, like, look, he's the teacher, he's the Messiah. Believe in him and just follow him. And try and understand what he's going to say. And Thomas is like, I know he's the Messiah. However, why are we doing this? I have a feeling I know why. And if it is, then he should have done the same with Rama. Well, we get to the part where Jesus tells Lazarus to come out. But even before that, when Jesus wept, that was very powerful. The Blessed Mary comes out and comforts Jesus, but Jesus cried. He showed his humility, showed his humanity to his disciples, and they've never seen him like that. They've never seen him cry, let alone wept. Wept is so much more. Wept is like, how many of us go through grief of sorrow of a loved one. That kind of crying. Not like, oh, I'm crying now because I failed my test. This was really, really powerful. So we get to the point of where Jesus claims to be in that moment of after the weeping, to be the resurrection, and to be, all those who come to me and believe in me and die will live forever. And that really piques Thomas's attention. Like, I cannot believe he just said that. But he's taking it way too literal. He's not thinking about the kingdom of heaven. He's not thinking about that. Thomas is thinking more of, Rhema was a believer in you. Rhema gave her all to you, and you're basically saying that she didn't because she wasn't a believer, and now she's dead and she's not alive. Again, this is an overall theme with episodes 7 and 8 of season 4, where Jesus is giving them so much foreshadowing in what's about to happen, what's about to take place. They don't understand, and rightfully so, but he is so frustrated that they don't understand him. And then he, later on, I'll talk about it with his discussion with Lazarus, but he claims to be the resurrection and all that, and Thomas is again really disgruntled of what he said. So they go to the tomb, and he tells his disciples to move the rock, and they kind of look at him funny, and it's actually pretty funny in the sense of translating it to nowadays. He basically turns to him and goes, "Did I stutter?" I mean, he didn't say that, but that's how many of us could take it nowadays. He says that they move the rock, the smell comes out, everyone's disgruntled and, kind of disgusted that he would do this, and in the smell too, he has an audience with him. And actually, Yusuf of Arimathea's dad is in Bethany at the time, and I think he's like one of the lawyers or something, or somebody that helps out with Lazarus' family, making sure everything's okay. Well, he's there. Well, he pronounces and says, "Lazarus, come out." Lazarus does. And everyone's amazed and either horrified. Thomas is mortified at what happened. But basically, Jesus tells Lazarus, "You've been asleep, and it was time to wake up." And he goes, "I'm so hungry. I'm all this." And it's a nice laugh and everything. And they take Mary and Martha take Lazarus back home to get him clothed and bathed and feed him. Meanwhile, Thomas is down on his knees crying, and he does not want anybody really to touch him, and he doesn't care about parables anymore. He doesn't care about rhymes and riddles. He wants the answer on why he couldn't do this to Rhema. Why did he make him suffer through all this? And Jesus basically told him it's just not time. It was just not time. Now is the time. And now is his time. That he may not have all the answers right now, but he will give it to Thomas soon. And I guess the word soon keeps popping up. So Thomas, takes it as it is. He gets pretty mad later in the episode, start throwing pots, and there's arguments through the disciples, and basically Tamar and Mary and Nathaniel and Thaddeus, James Lesser, Peter tries to corral everybody, and Judas, of course, speaks out, and again, Judas is starting to slip away, and it's not looking good for Judas at all. I mean, we know what's going to happen eventually, but you start to see how his back is turning to him. It wasn't just a, all of a sudden kind of thing where someone offered him, was it like 40 pieces of silver or 20 pieces of silver to portray Jesus. It was a buildup. And we start to see that throughout these episodes. Jesus talks to Lazarus, and even in Lazarus is saying he is trying to help Jesus understand why it is so hard for the apostles to understand him. Because Lazarus, his whole life, has known Jesus to be the Son of God. However, Jesus is divine and human, and not just human, right? Jesus doesn't understand the inner workings of humanity fully. Well, he does, but again, he has that divine part to him that kind of shields him away from that. And that you can't always read in parables and everything and expect people to understand you the way that you want to be understood. We are human and we will understand stuff more literal. But Jesus isn't giving out stuff in literal, and that's what Lazarus is trying to portray to him and tell him. And Jesus is like, even after you rise, you still don't understand. And Lazarus is like, no, that's not true. But, his friend is scared for him because he knows, like Jesus keeps repeating, that his time has come. Well, then we get to episode 8. Episode 8 is tough. This is Passover. This is the last time we will see Jesus outside the gates of Jerusalem before the resurrection. Jesus is, again, finding it very, very hard to portray his message clearly enough for his apostles to understand what is going on. Yeah. What is very cool, though, and what I've really enjoyed was the fact that Yusuf and Shemuel actually take Jesus' side in the Sanhedrin and say, all right, we're going to go to Bethany because Yusuf's dad is there, and we are going to go against the Sanhedrin and give Jesus a chance. And they do. They sit down with him, next to him, and have bread with him, and try and discuss, what is going on. And Jesus, again, speaks in parables, but it's a little bit more clearly, especially the fact that rabbis are more accompanied by an understanding of parables as opposed to the common teachings of his disciples. But Jesus is met by Mary. Not Blessed Mary, but Lazarus' sister Mary, who bought him an expensive bottle of cologne with literally all of her savings. And this is where we see Mary wipe the feet of Jesus. Very powerful. I didn't see it coming. I just saw her kind of buying cologne and didn't really think much of it. But this was the episode where this was happening, and it happened right in front of Shemuel. And Shemuel, again, back to what the readings were today, was more of, them being so zealous on the rules and the 613 commandments that God gave them in Torah, that he has forgotten everything that Jesus of Nazareth has just taught him. Throws it all out the window. And he goes back to the old Shemuel that we saw more in season 2. Not in season 3, but in season 2. Because in season 3, he kind of came around and, sat with Jesus and prayed with him. But no, we are starting to see the Shemuel in season 2, and I will get more back to that in predictions. Judas comes out, screws up again, basically mocks Mary for spending so much on this cologne just to wash it on Jesus's feet, that it could have been spent for food and lodging and that type of stuff for the rest of the disciples, that it was just wasted away. But what Jesus was teaching was about the poor and about the sick and about the needy, that she just gave her all to God in charity just to wipe the feet of the Son of God, to the Lamb of God. And again, Judas doesn't see it. Judas has eyes but does not see. He has ears but does not hear. He has a mouth but does not speak. And unfortunately, it's going to cost him. Then we see towards the end of the episode, they are outside the gates of Judea, and it's time. It's time. He sends Simon the Zealot and Matthew into the city to go get a donkey, and tells them actually what to look for, precisely what to say, and precisely where to look for the donkey, which is pretty remarkable. But again, he is God. He knows. He sends them in there, and well, what happens is basically says, this donkey is for the Lord. It's needed for the Lord. And fortunately, the guy who gives up the donkey is a wannabe follower of Christ. He believes in his teachings, believes in the miracles, and is ready to see Christ in the come to Jerusalem for Passover, which is what a lot of people are waiting for. Actually, you see. You see many people getting ready. We even see Pilate in this episode, Pontius Pilate, with Quirtus Atticus, and they're discussing, and Pontius is making a mockery of Jesus and not really saying what's going on, and you can start to see where Atticus is actually kind of starting to turn towards that way. Again, I'll cover it more in the predictions of what's to come. But then you start to see the meeting between Joanna's husband, Herod, and Pilate, and they're all, kind of mocking him at first, and then you can kind of start to see where Herod is starting to get scared that there's going to be an uprising if Jesus does. And then Pontius is like, well, this is just some make-believe stuff. This is not real. This is just a partial healer. Like, he's nobody. And then he kind of questions them. And, you start to see where they start to get a little worried of what's to come, right? Well, Jesus receives his donkey. He pulls out the harness that he has inherited from many generations, many generations. And it is probably the most meaningful thing that Mary owned in her house, and has been all led up to this moment. And palms are being given out and all over because the coming of the Messiah, the King, Hosanna, David, and Hosanna is come. Even Joanna gives so much of her savings, runs away from her husband, who's an adulterer, runs away, gives all of her money to buy a huge thing of a huge bundle of palms just to give them all out. It's remarkable. And that was what Jesus was talking about. That's where Judas missed, is to give your money and not think about it twice, and to give it to the poor, to give it to the needy, to give it to those who are wanted and in most need of thy mercy. And then that's it. It ends right there. Season 5 will cover Holy Week. So I hope you're prepared. Predictions. Obviously, I believe Yusuf is Joseph of Arimathea. I think in a previous episode, or at least in my thoughts, I believe that Gaius was going to be the centurion. However, I believe that Gaius may play a different role down the line after the resurrection, but I'll have to think more hard on that. I think the centurion actually now is going to be Atticus. The cohortus, the secret police, is going to be Atticus, because he followed who was Zechariah, who the donkey belonged to. He followed him, and it was mysterious, and of course he is very interested in Jesus and Jesus' teachings, and of course he made a mockery after Simon the Zealot's brother kind of convinced him, and he just kind of wanted some information. But then he starts to change and see so many things that this teacher is doing that no one has ever done. I think that Cohortus will be the one to say that truly this was the Son of God, and later become a disciple. Judas. I think Judas is going to get tipped off by Shmuel. And the reason why I say that is because after Shmuel has a little outburst with Mary, Lazarus' sister, Shmuel and Judas kind of meet outside, and Shmuel hints at, can I see you soon? Can I see you later? Well, I think Shmuel, even especially when he was handed a palm by Joanna, threw it down in disgust. Like, this is not the king. This is not the one who I want to be the Messiah. So I think that Shmuel, understanding that Judas values coins and everything, especially seeing how Judas saw and, examined the pottery and the cologne that Mary had bought, will understand that Judas values a lot of coins. And in order to find information, and I think Shmuel will actually accidentally turn Jesus over. I think that there will be, Pharisees that follow him and everything. And I think that, maybe Shmuel will have a change of heart and accidentally tip Jesus off. But we'll see. Because you never know about Shmuel. Shmuel has been a very up and down character since the beginning. He's had some good points. He's had some bad points. And he's back on his bad track. So we'll see what is to come of the Chosen. Any other predictions? Yusuf, Judas, Shmuel. I tell you what I can't wait to see is definitely what we read in today's readings pertaining to Jesus getting upset about the unruliness in the Jerusalem temple. I cannot wait to see that scene. I think that scene is going to be very, very powerful, and it's going to shock a lot of people, and it's going to obviously shock a lot of his disciples who have, again, only seen him to be strong and powerful and something of unique. Oh, one thing I want to talk about was remarkable that I kind of skipped over was the whole carrying of Roman equipment. I think that was very, very powerful scene, very thought of scene. I skipped over it in this review. I think it was in the episodes 4 through 6 showing. That was awesome, where Jesus said, well, it's only this way. It's only up this hill. It's only another mile. It's a showing of I wouldn't say gratitude, but humility and just kindness, right? In order to help others, maybe some people who have disrespected you, maybe if you help them in a very humbling way, that they will see you in a different way. And you saw immediately after Jesus said that, many of the Roman soldiers started taking back their equipment and started taking back their comments that they were saying to the Jews. And actually became a lot more humble. That's not a scene to overlook. I apologize for overlooking that in this review. Again, it's a solo episode. There's a lot that came out of this season, for sure. It was a very powerful season, and next season is going to be even more. Especially with Holy Week, there's going to be so much to unravel in that time span, because much of what we know of Jesus' life goes on during this week. So this is going to be a very jam-packed season coming up. Thank you guys for watching this episode so much. Sensation of the week for me is going to be Thomas. Thomas the disciple, Thomas, Trouble Thomas, the Terrible Thomas. it was really, really hard to watch. I think the actor portrayed it amazingly, the grief and depression that he was going through. But it's going to be remarkable to see Thomas after the resurrection, touching the wounds of Christ, to realize that this is truly Christ and not just some ghost. I cannot wait to see that arc, and I pray for that. I pray for him. Yeah, enough said about Thomas. Not in a bad way, but if you see season 4, you will understand the heaviness that I give for Thomas, and a lot of people will give for Thomas on social media. I highly encourage you guys to watch this season. It is remarkable. The Chosen in general is remarkable. What they have done with such a small project in the beginning is truly a masterpiece. It has become my favorite series of all time, not just because I'm a Christian, not just because I'm a Catholic, but just because it is just so well done to portray the life of Jesus and the Bible itself. I mean, they'll cover stuff in the Old Testament as well. But thank you guys so much for watching this episode. I know it was a solo episode. Next episode is going to be a very, very powerful episode. I hope you guys tune in, because this may be the most controversial episode. And in fact, I say that a lot, but a lot of Catholics will get their feelings hurt with this next coming episode that Blake is preparing, and I will be along for the ride as well. Thank you guys for watching this. I hope you subscribed and followed where you're listening to this. We're back. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for staying for this long episode. I think this may be the longest episode I've recorded, and it definitely has been for a solo episode. But again, thank you guys so much for watching this episode. God bless, and shalom.